All right, well, thank you so much for coming. If we get your attention, really appreciate you coming. Just so that you understand where you are, this is the Oxford Networks Data Center. My name is Matt Jacobson. I'm Executive Vice President of Sales for Oxford Networks. I'm also a co-chair of Angus's campaign, so I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that you're here to join us. This building, up to about 4 months ago, was, or 4 months, 18 months ago, was a very secure NATO communications facility. And we're in the process of turning it into the most secure commercially available data center anywhere. So that's what we're doing here. And here's what we're doing here. Real quickly, I'd like to go through some of the ground rules. This is live. We're going out on the internet. Mark's in the back with all that gear. Wave, Mark. We're taking questions online. Audience members may ask questions at the podiums. We're going to break it down into these categories over my left shoulder. Please hold your question on a topic until that topic comes up. We're going to get to all of them. And if we don't get the topic, there might be a little time afterwards. We'll do our best to answer some questions online after the event. But we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can, and we've got to be out of here by 8 o'clock. So that's the rules. I'd like to introduce Charlene Hamuka, who is a experienced IT executive. She's been in Silicon Valley and spent some time with IBM, and is here helping us tonight. She'll be handling the online questions for us. And it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend and the next senator from Maine, Angus King.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Well, the first thing I want to say before we start talking about technology is if there's anybody online from any large technology companies, the name you want to remember is Brunswick Landing. This facility is fantastic. Oxford Networks has gotten first dibs on this data center, but there's about 1 million square feet of buildings here with tremendous fiber capacity and security and all the things that are necessary. So I had to put in a little promotion for Steve Levesque.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to try to do today is talk really about technology and a series of issues, as you see, and I'm going to share sort of where I'm thinking on these things, and we'll take some questions because technology is the future of this country, and how the government interacts with technology is a very important part of our economic, social, and cultural future. So, Matt, you're gonna start off with the questions.
I'm going to be Ryan Seacrest tonight.
Yeah.
So, the first question is really, why don't you talk a little bit about rural broadband, why you think that's important, why you've made that such a centerpiece so far?
Well, I guess the best way to answer that is to come back with a question. Would you buy a house where you walked in and they said, "I'm sorry, but you can never have any electricity in this house"? You wouldn't do it. And broadband, to me, is the electricity of the 21st century, and particularly in rural areas. And I've started hearing almost from the time I announced from people in some very rural areas and some not so rural areas saying, "I can't get decent broadband and it's killing me." And really the issue is economics. A business can't locate at a place where they can't operate broadband. It's an economic death sentence for rural America. So I started thinking about it, and I went back and did some research about Franklin D. Roosevelt and rural electrification. When Roosevelt proposed rural electrification in the 30s, it's not unlike this situation. 90% of the people in the urban centers of America had electricity. 10% of the rural people had electricity. So there was this vast discrepancy. Now, it's not quite so bad. In the U.S. now, it's about 85 or 90% have broadband access in the urban areas, about 50% in the rural areas, but it's still, that's something we really have to do something about. Not only about businesses, but many people won't buy a house. I've talked to realtors who said, you know, I tour around the house and say, "Oh, by the way, you can't get broadband here," and the buyer says, "Well, no thanks, I'm going to live somewhere else." And that's a recipe for out-migration, which is not something Maine needs. So that's why I think it's such an important issue, and that we've And by the way, an amendment just passed today in the U.S. Senate by Senator Warner of Virginia that has a rural broadband initiative as part of the Farm Bill. And the bill went through this afternoon, survived a filibuster threat, and so that's a piece of good news.
It is good, and from just a personal perspective, Oxford Networks, of course, we run a pretty big fiber company as well as here in Maine, a regional fiber company. And so one of the concerns we have is we would love to be able to provide more services to more rural parts of Maine. We get nervous when folks talk about, oh, we're going to duplicate our services. We've already got fiber in the ground. We've spent a lot of capital. What would you say to folks that have that concern?
Well, I don't have, I guess first thing I should say is I don't think the government should be choosing winners and losers, and I don't think they should even be choosing which technology is the right technology. I think what they should do is look for results. And the results should be the highest speed now, how about this? The highest speed now obtainable by an ordinary citizen in Romania. Believe it or not, that's a lot better than Maine. Or, in other words, what's the commercial adequate speed around the world? That's what we should be shooting for. Not if we put, 10 megabytes in the statute, that'll become the floor, and I don't think we should be doing that. So as far as people like Oxford, if you've already done it, then I don't see any reason the government should come in and say we're going to pay somebody else to do it. But there may be a section, a part of Maine, there may be places where the carriers can do it. There may also be places using, again, the rural electrification model where there are local co-ops that do it. Local people get together because the cable company or whoever says the houses are too far apart, we can't do it, we don't want to do it, it doesn't make economic sense. So maybe it's a local group like the Down East Electrical Co-op up in Washington County. I mean, that's what worked in the 30s. So I think it's got to be a variety of solutions.
Good. Do we have any questions from the audience on this topic? We have one? Yes, sir.
Up there. Angus, just to follow up on that, and I wrote it down so I could make sure I covered all the points, and to make this just more local. Why is broadband access and adoption so important to rural areas of the country, especially for Maine, one of the most rural of states? And how would improved broadband access and adoption benefit the lives of Mainers?
Well, it gives us a fighting chance to have an economic future. I mean, if you don't have broadband access, in my view, within the next 5 to 8 years in all areas, those areas are written off. They're not going to have an economic future. And I don't think this is a nice to have deal. I think this is a must-have deal. And then the other piece is the cultural piece. It's how people are connected these days. It's how people communicate with each other. And it's as if we had a system where we said, okay, we're going to have this thing called the U.S. Postal Service, but all you guys aren't going to have, you're not going to have mailboxes. You're not going to be able to get your mail. You're not even going to be able to go down to the post office and get your mail. I mean, that's how ridiculous it would be if we had to, if there's an echo in here. That's technology. That's technology for you.
That's got a lot of latency, though.
That's not bad latency, though. What's the ping rate on that thing? But Phil, I think it's critical, and it's like building roads. And the problem is now in Maine, we have, for example, we have the 3-ring binder, which is a terrific fiber backbone that goes throughout the state, but we don't have the connections outwards. It's like building, it's as if the interstate went all the way up, but there were no feeder roads. So we can't get to it. So that's the last mile problem is, I think, what we really have to work on. But I've been interested in technology for a long time, and just as I was thinking it through, it just occurred to me this rural broadband in Maine, as well as rural areas around the country, is just critical. Otherwise, all the commerce is going to be concentrated, and we're going to lose a lot of creativity and economic opportunity. Thanks.
Charlene has one from the web.
Actually, Angus, this is our first live chat. Somebody responded while you were talking, and they've got a question. This is from Bob Higgins in Portland. And his question is, why do you think the USA is behind other countries in their internet connection speeds, and how do you think that can be changed?
I think probably we're behind in part because of complacency. I think people think what we've got is really good, and they don't realize that in other parts of the world, I mentioned Romania, France, Scandinavia, I think Costa Rica maybe. There are a lot of places that are way ahead of us, and I think we just haven't really focused on it. I think, frankly, the other problem is that the elites, if you will, the political and media elites are in places that have pretty good access. And they don't realize the extent of this lack of good connectivity once you get outside of the major population centers. So I've often felt that if Congress would meet in a few places that are really hurting economically, maybe there'd be more activity about economic development, but they're meeting in a place that's doing okay. It's a question of out of sight, out of mind, and I think that explains part of the problem.
Okay. Last call for rural access. One more.
I'm going to ask this question.
I can hear you. You can stand up. Just no.
So, instead of like rural, in places that already do have connectivity, but like really limited, like they only have like one company.
Right.
Would you like support more competitiveness? Because like my parents, they like the company that is like in their area that provides like internet for them. They have to have internet in order for their phones. So then, for their phone, like they have to pay for like.
Have to get both.
Yeah, they have to get both of the phones, and they aren't going to use that other phone.
Well,
so like they want more options.
Competition and options are generally better.
Yeah.
Okay. But there are places where I'd settle for one provider. I mean, we've got a lot of places that you just can't get it at all. But generally, if you can, for example, you can have in Brunswick we have competition. You can get DSL, or you can get from the cable company, or you could get satellite. So there, you have options, but in lots of places, as you say, you don't. More options are better. Competition generally brings down prices. And one point that you touch on that I ought to mention is, I don't think the government should be talking about what the right solution is. In other words, is it fiber to the home or is it wireless? Is it, or something, is it DSL? In my experience, if government chooses the technology, by the time the ink is dry on the law, there's a new technology. And I just don't think, I think that we ought to be talking about results. And it may be that wireless is the right answer in some places, and fiber to the home is the right answer somewhere else. And it'll depend on the topography and the region and the distances and all those kinds of things.
Okay. Well, why don't we move on to economic development? And I know that's through our experience, that's a subject dear to your heart.
You and I have done that for
once or twice.
A while.
How do you view technology and high tech as a route towards economic development, especially in Maine?
Well, Maine historically has been geographically challenged. When I grew up and you looked at the map of the U.S., where was Maine? The upper right-hand corner. Around it was all white. Now we know that's called Canada. But geography has always been a limiting factor. I remember trying to get Harley-Davidson to move an engine factory to Maine, and their response was, no, it needs to be nearer the geographic center of the country where we can ship these big, heavy pieces around, and shipping costs are important. The technology eliminates largely that kind of issue where, we can't build big, heavy engines, but we can do software, we can do commerce, we can do e-commerce, and all of those things. So particularly for a rural state, technology is more important than it would be anywhere else, because it's the way it levels the playing field geographically. It deals with this geographic problem that particularly a rural state that's in the upper corner has. So that's why I think the three-ring binder project, that's a broadband backbone that's been just completed in the last few months is very important to Maine, but now we have to go the next piece and finish the wiring up. You're not going to be surprised that I'm going to say I think digital devices in the hands of students is an important economic development tool. And notice I said digital devices. It may not, the next generation may not be laptops. It may be an iPad or some kind of Android tablet or something that's cheaper, lighter, more powerful, and does all those things. But I've always felt that the society that is more technologically literate has a real advantage in the 21st century. Whoever has the most well-trained, able people is who's going to win. Matt and I have had experience. Matt used to be the head of something called Maine and Company, which was a private sector economic development entity, and we went on trips together to recruit businesses and those kinds of things. It surprises a lot of people that when you ask a business to come to Maine or come anywhere, the first question they ask is, do you have the qualified people? That's the number one criteria. It's not taxes, it's not regulation, it's do you have the qualified people to fill my jobs? And that's why the combination of a really good technological infrastructure and a solid educational system is, in the long run, the answer to economic development. By the way, there's no silver bullet to economic development. We've learned that. As my friend Laurie LaChance says, there's no silver bullet, there's silver buckshot. Which is really the right image if you think about it. There are a lot of solutions, and you never know what's going to be important for economic development. I had a guy in my office who brought a business up here, and I said, how did you happen to come to Maine? And he sort of shuffled and looked at his feet, and finally he said, well, to be honest, I ride a Harley, and it was because Maine didn't have a helmet law. I mean, who would have ever thought the lack of a helmet law was an economic development strategy? But the point is, you never know what's going to work. But I'll tell you what, without the technological underpinning, without the bandwidth, we're sunk.
Henry, do you have one from the audience?
Yeah, I just want to say we are streaming this live. So if you do have a question from the audience, a few people emailed us and are actually here and wanted to ask a few questions. So if you do have a question, you actually have to stand in front of the mic, just so you know, because people on the internet are listening.
Fair
so
enough,
just wanted to let people know.
Thanks. Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? First one to the microphone wins.
Thank you. I suppose I have a vested interest in this since I'm section chair for the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers in Maine. The other half of economic development, from my perspective, is bringing technology businesses to Maine. These are businesses that, the starting salaries for college grads are 75 and up.
I'll take any salaries for college grads these days.
Well, true. But, so what do we do to, encourage things like, Corky Ellis's Kepware or Tyler down in Falmouth? Or, a couple that come to mind. These aren't researchy types things. These are real development types of things which we can hopefully support somehow.
And it's all about, but we got to have the basic infrastructure. It's like not
it's
having
the other
airports or
we
roads.
need the infrastructure. I think, though, in ways we're getting that. We need the last mile desperately.
Yeah.
Especially where I am.
I'm with you.
But beyond that, then we can begin to bring some of these businesses in with high-paying jobs. So what do we do? How do we do it?
You start with the infrastructure. That's number one, and this answer may surprise you a little bit, but one of the things we do is maintain the quality of life that we have here, because if people can work anywhere, they're going to choose the nice places. So we have to be careful that we don't compromise what we all find wonderful about Maine in the name of economic development, because the quality of life in Maine is one of our major economic development assets.
Thank you.
Sir.
Hello.
Hi.
I work for Texas Instruments, formerly National Semiconductor.
Sure.
So,
are you here in the main plant?
Yes, I am at South Portland.
Cool.
So we owe a lot to you. you were personally involved in, I'd be talking with a Southern accent right now, because our plant would have been put in Texas. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, 90% of Texas Instruments electronics revenues come from sales outside the U.S. As a senator, what policies would you propose to further open global trade so that the vast portfolio of technology IP developed in the U.S. can better sell into markets around the world?
First, I have to tell you a funny story about your plant and how it came. We were being sort of tested by National Semiconductor, and they brought all these big shots from California, and we had a meeting with all the commissioners. And one of the National Semiconductor guys said, "How long will it take to get our permits?" And I looked at Ned Sullivan, who was the head of the DEP in the front row, and I said, "Mr. Sullivan, how long will it take to get the permits?" He stood up and said, "Sooner than 90 days, Governor." We had rehearsed this. And it turned out it was 29 days. And we didn't cut any rules, we didn't shortcut anything, but it was, pre-engineering to get that done. So that was, I feel real positive about that. In terms of trade, I believe in open trade between countries. I don't think the U.S. has done a very good job of negotiating with other countries who want access to our markets. Because in effect, when we sign a free trade agreement, it's as if that country becomes a state for the purposes of trade. And we haven't done enough to require them to meet some of our standards. They don't have to have exactly what we have, but some kind of labor protection, some kind of environmental protections, and some kind of IP protections. So if everybody in the world wants to sell into this market, and I don't think we've done an adequate job of extracting from them some concessions on how they're going to act in order to open their markets up. A friend of mine got mad at me for using this analogy, but my experience with NAFTA and Canada is that it's like a funnel with the big end in Canada and the little end here. And it's real easy for Canadian stuff to come this way, but it's a little harder for us to thread that small end and get it out into the other end. And I think it's, everybody's in favor of free trade, but I don't think we've been very good negotiators. And particularly for a company like yours, it's all about IP protection. And I think if somebody is not doing IP, we should talk about, okay, you can't have the full and complete access to our market that you want.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So we have another one online on this topic. Charlene.
Yes, we do. This is another online chat that just came in. This one's from Nolan Howe of Winthrop, Maine. And they ask, how do you think technology in the hands of students is going to help the economy?
Well, it starts, technology in the hands of students, which creates young people with a high level of technological skills, will be a huge help to the economy for the very reason that I said, because employers look for skilled workers. Oxford Networks wants people who are adept at the use of technology. And if you've got kids that started in the 7th grade and that laptop is an extension of their arm, they're going to be better at it. I used to say, Michael Jordan didn't get good at basketball going to basketball lab 40 minutes a week. He got good at it by doing it every day. And the same thing goes with the technology in the hands of the kids. Now, here's one of the things we've learned, though, with 10 years of experience now in Maine. The effectiveness of the laptop project depends enormously on the preparation of the teacher. If you just hand out laptops, it doesn't work. And if you have a principal and teachers who are into it and who are well prepared and who've had good, solid professional development, it's fantastic. If it's just a hardware project, it's not going to be that effective. And in fact, around Maine, it's uneven. There are places where it just sings, and there are places where it's not as good because the teachers either don't use it or don't want to use it, or they haven't really had the opportunity to get the necessary professional development. But the laptop project is not a technology project. It's a learning project. And it's simply putting the tools into the hands of kids that are useful and necessary for functioning in the 21st century. The laptop is the 21st century pencil. And I don't think anybody would argue that the way to handle pencils in the classroom is to have a pencil lab one day a week and 3 pencils in the classroom for all the kids to share every now and then. It just doesn't work. But in terms of economic development, it's a question of if we have the most technologically literate society on earth, we win. And the way to start that is in the schools.
So we're going to move on now.
I think we got another. Al?
Are we getting into education a little bit now?
Yeah, Al.
We're going to get to education in two.
I had a follow-up question to that, but I'll...
All right. When we get to education, we'll go there. All right. In fact, I'm on point A. So right now we're going to talk about government efficiency and openness and how technology affects those things.
Well, tonight is a kind of test of some of that. We're all here, but there are also people anywhere in the world who are watching, listening, commenting, sending questions, and that's, that was never possible before relatively recently. Now you can listen to the Maine legislature hearings online, live streaming, but you can go even beyond that. I mean, I understand, for example, somewhere, maybe it's in Boston, there's this crowdsource thing where if you drive over a pothole, you hit an app, and it notifies people who can go and then fix the pothole. You don't have to necessarily send a whole lot of people down.
They can now ignore you online.
Yeah, they can ignore you online. But it enables, we're just scratching the surface of this. It enables a connectivity between people and their government that was just never possible before. I mean, I get an email once a week or so or once every 2 weeks from Olympia Snow, the snow report, and it's an email, and it's good. It's effective way to communicate, but you can do it. You can go to the next level, and you can talk to people. You can have a chat. You can be in Maine and share what's going on in Washington. So I think the people now are frustrated and they feel disconnected from their government. And it seems to me that the technology allows us a way to be connected. I think we're going to talk about Facebook at some point, but it's a tremendous opportunity to connect with people.
How about from the audience on government use of technology?
Well, let me just add.
One more.
Well, you got to remember, when I came into office, there was no internet. I mean, I remember announcing in February of 1995 the state's first website, and I didn't know what I was announcing. They said, "Go on out and announce this, Governor," and here's what it is. But and for example, it sounds silly today, but being able to re-register your car online, that's huge. Instead of having to go and go through what I used to call the Secretary of State's treasure hunt, where you go from the dealership to the to the motor vehicles to somewhere else, the DMV treasure hunt. The other thing is being able to get a hunting license or a fishing license online in the middle of the night. L.L. Bean figured that out 100 years ago. That's why L.L. Bean is open 24 hours a day, so hunters and fishermen could come in at 4 a.m. on their way to the lake and buy a fishing license. Well, 100 years later, now you can do it in Maine in terms of getting your license. By the way, when we were the second state in the country to be able to get hunting and fishing licenses online, and I said to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, we're going to do it, and I want it done by my State of the State address in January. And I found out later the way they did it was you went online and you typed in your application, and when it got to their office, it turned into a fax. And went to somebody, somebody picked it up and carried it over. But by golly, you got your license, But I think we were the second state after Georgia. But those kinds of things, just to make the interactions, time is one of our most valuable commodities. And to the extent you don't have to drive someplace, park, sit in line, that's a tremendous improvement in the way people can interact with their government.
Charlene's got one online.
And I think this is just along the lines of what you were starting to talk about, but the question is, how would you use technology to reduce the cost of government? and make it more open and participatory?
Well, in fact, we did do, my first year in office, we had a budget. We walked into a budget problem. And one of the ways we dealt with it was by basically a top-to-bottom analysis of state government and where we had personnel and where we could use technology to more efficiently administer the state government. And we did find, I can't remember, I think it was $45 million worth of savings by using technology as a productivity enhancer. So to the extent you can automate some of these functions, it saves personnel costs and it makes government both faster, more efficient, and less expensive. And you know, industry has revolutionized its processes in terms of use of technology, and government and education is one of the, and healthcare, I have to say, are one of the last areas to really fully integrate it into their processes to make them more efficient and frankly less expensive.
A little bit of a follow-on on that. We just got another chat in, and the question was, you know, how do you think you would engage the citizens to make use of these online tools?
Well, the first thing is you got to tell them about it. You got to make it clear that they have these this option, and communication, and publicity, frankly, and just making people aware of what's out there. Having a sign at the town clerk's office. You don't have to come in here next year. You can do it online at, you know, maine.gov, or you know, those kinds of things. And just being sure that the portals are friendly, that they're easy to use, that they're not frustrating. We forget now, most of us use the internet and order, buy things. When e-commerce first began in the, you know, around 2000 or so, or late 90s, something like 65% of the transactions never happened. People gave up in the middle. You know, they'd start, you've all had that experience, and then you type in your wrong P.O. box and the whole thing erases and stuff. We're much better at doing those things. So part of it is to make sure as a user it's a good experience. I used to do a thing occasionally where I would call 800 numbers, the state 800 numbers, you know, and Kay called it scaring the troops. But, you know, to pretend that you're a customer. And I remember once I called the tourism thing and I said, well, I want to take a vacation in Maine. And the lady said, oh, that'll be great and we'd love to have you and everything. And we had a nice conversation. And then at the end, I said, well, so can you send me some materials? She said, yes, you'll have them within 3 weeks. Well, we fixed that. But part of it is just to, you know, to use the facilities. I always love the MBNA motto over all the doors. Some of you may have seen it. It said, think of yourself as the customer. And I think that's a great way that government should think of itself.
Thank you.
So we're going to move to education, so you might want to move towards the podium.
Al.
So let's talk about education. I know that's an area that was particular interest when you were governor, and in light of technology, how do you see, you know, the new technology interacting to make our education system work a little better?
Well, I think we need to take it to the next level, frankly. And the laptops were the right product at the time. Ironically, we're now talking about, you're talking about the cloud. 12 years ago, when we first started talking about the laptops, we started talking about what are called thin clients, which was a device that hooks into the cloud, and you don't have to have so much computing power in the device. Everything's stored on the network. The only trouble was in 1999 it didn't work.
Well, you didn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, we didn't have the bandwidth. Remember, Duke? That was we thought thin clients. But now that may be a solution that would give you a much less expensive device. And frankly, you have a little bit more control of it in terms of the student use. And you know, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think that's one of the opportunities. The other thing is to free teachers from the drudgery so they can do the fun part of teaching. I've been teaching at Bowdoin and Bates the last 8 years. I hate grading exams. I like teaching. But if you can do, for example, online homework, The kids do it online, they answer the questions, it goes into the school's computer. The next morning the teacher comes in, they're all scored, they can see how everybody's doing, they can see, oh yeah, all my kids got the subtraction problems, but they missed the multiplication problems, so let's spend some more time on multiplication. You can target your teaching much more effectively. Then now when you're sort of intuiting who gets it and who doesn't, you give a test, you take them home and grade them, they get the test back 10 days later, by that time you're on another unit. The test should be a diagnostic tool instead of just an assessment tool, so that you can use it and integrate it into your teaching. So I think there's a huge opportunity. The other thing is to allow the computers to do the drudgery part. A great teacher should not be teaching the multiplication tables. A great teacher should be teaching how to use the multiplication tables in a way to solve problems, but let the computer do the rote part. So I think those are some ways that like I say, I think we're just scratching the surface. And I've seen I see teachers pretty regularly who say, you know, I thought you were crazy, but now I can't imagine ever going back to teaching without these devices in the kids' hands. Lawrence?
Well, thank you. The innovative industry in this country is in dire need of technically highly educated people. So from your perspective, what do you think the political leadership could do to encourage or incentivize students to take up disciplines such as technology, engineering, science, math? And how would you think the cost of obtaining degrees in such disciplines could be lowered?
One of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain, everybody has a Mark Twain quote, but my favorite is, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. Isn't that cool? History doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. Here's one way that from my own personal history. My mother both my parents were the first people in their families to ever go to college. My mother went to college on a scholarship, and the deal on the scholarship was the state of Virginia would pay her tuition if she would agree to teach in Virginia a year for year. Now, why can't we do something like that? If we need people, for example, if we need STEM teachers, let's forgive their scholarships if they're willing to stay and contribute back into the schools and into the community. I mean, that's just one sort of shorthand way that it occurred to me. And I remember somebody talking to me about this. I know, maybe we could have this new idea of giving people scholarships in exchange for staying and teaching. And I said, you know, my mother did that 70 years ago. So I think that's one possibility. The other thing is, frankly, I don't think we've done a good enough job communicating to young people what's out there. And it's not necessarily all about college education. I walked into a meeting in Biddeford about a month ago, which shocked me. I sat down, and it was with a chamber. And the head of the chamber said, "We've got a real employment problem down here, Governor." And I thought, okay, this is what we always hear. And he said, "No, it's not what you think. We've got 500 highly skilled, well-paying technology jobs that we can't fill. We can't fill them." And these are in things like machining and metal products. And part of that is the kids have all been told you have to go to college. And it's not cool to work with your hands. And I think we need to be thinking about the fact that, you know, these are really good jobs. Maybe they do take some level of technical training because they have to run CAD machines and those kinds of things. But they don't necessarily require 4 years of college. The other thing is, you know, I think the society gets what it values. And we have to value more these kinds of disciplines. Maybe if engineers made more than investment bankers, this problem would go away. But that would be the way I would look at
it. So we have one more from the internet, and then we'll come back over here.
We actually have one comment and one question. So the first, I'll read the comment, and it says, no name, but I am a 50-year-old accounting student. I'm learning a lot about technology in the business world. They said, this type of conversation is such a breath of fresh air. Technology is for older students now as well. So
I don't think that was my sister, but it might be.
They didn't sign their name, so who knows? Now,
Signed Mom. Yeah.
now for the question. Whoops. How does Maine prevent brain drain, or how does Maine encourage its students to stay in Maine rather than seek opportunities elsewhere?
Boy, I've thought about that a lot. I think the first thing to say, and this doesn't make us feel any better, but the first thing to say is this is a worldwide problem. One of the things Mary and I learned on our RV trip was that a lot of the issues that we think of as Maine are happening everywhere. Michigan, people are coming from the lower peninsula to the cities. Oregon, they're going to Portland. Washington, they're going to Seattle. They're leaving the eastern areas of. So it's a problem everywhere. In fact, I have a friend that lives in Norway, and he says, you know, our biggest problem is all the kids are going to Oslo. So it's a common problem, but that doesn't mean we give up on it. I think the first thing is economic opportunity. I mean, people are going to leave, as they have throughout history, to find better jobs. And if we can develop the kind of economic opportunity with companies like National Semiconductor here, or Fairchild, or IDEX, or some of the companies that are growing up in the Bangor area and around the state, that's the best thing. Oxford Networks, you know. my son Matt here didn't have to leave, you know. But yes, absolutely. So keep creating that kind of opportunity. The other thing is, I'm not sure the problem is as bad as we think, because a lot of times the kids come back. My oldest son left Maine for 10 years, but as soon as he started a family, he came back. And he's here because of the quality of life and because it's a great place to raise kids. And in fact, I remember there were some figures recently that Portland had one of the highest influxes of people between 20 and 30 of any state in the country. I mean, it was something like that. I mean, people are coming back, but it's a lot about, and the other thing it's about, oddly enough, is amenities. We sort of joke about that, but having things like you know, the festival on the waterfront in Bangor, or you know, John Miller, the Pirate Festival in Eastport. He'd kill me if I didn't mention the Pirate Festival. Or you know, having a baseball team and a hockey team and a basketball team in Portland. Those are the kinds of things that make a community livable. When I came into office, I never would have dreamed. If you'd have told me the major economic development engine for the Mid-Coast would be an art museum, I'd have said, are you nuts? But the Farnsworth, plus the MBNA, I have to admit, but the Farnsworth has become a really important part of the economic development entity up in Rockland. One final example. San Antonio, Texas, which collects, I think, about 60% of all the tourism money that's spent in Texas, in this one city. And San Antonio was just going nowhere, and then they developed, the Ladies Garden Society developed something called the Riverwalk. And they've got the Alamo and the Riverwalk. And by the way, the ladies had to overcome the all-male city council that wanted to pave over the river and develop this Riverwalk, and it's become one of the leading tourist attractions in San Antonio. And on top of now, with the tourism, there's a lot of business that's gone there, and it's become just a tremendous economic driver of that region of Texas. So it's, like I said before, it's silver buckshot. It's all those pieces together. Now, Al.
Thank you for being patient.
No, that's fine. The Riverwalk is a gorgeous place, by the way. My context, as you know, I'm with Walsh Education, and we're focused on K-12 education. So there's been a lot of good discussion about technology, and especially it tends to focus on one-to-one interaction between a student and a computer or a device or a website. It's a way to remove drudgery from the teacher's day-to-day job. But my concern and my question is, what's your perspective on developing and promoting tools to facilitate the student-teacher interaction in a standards-based classroom and to remove some of the drudgery of the teacher's everyday work removed from the student-teacher simple interaction that we focus on today.
Well, if you think about it, education is one of the few things that's delivered in almost exactly the same way as it was in 1750. If a person who was born in the 1700s wandered into a main classroom, they'd feel right at home. Desks, person sitting at the front, lecturing. The technology allows us to change that picture so that the teacher is no longer the conveyor of the content. The content comes from the device. The teacher becomes a coach. And I've been in lots of internet classrooms where the teacher isn't standing in front but is wandering around between the desks, commenting, suggesting, showing, pointing, have you thought of this, have you thought of that? To me, that's a more, that's what the teacher, that's the teacher's role as opposed to just being the person that stands in the front of the classroom and delivers the content. And the exciting classrooms that I've seen, that's what happens. And then the students, by this mysterious process, take ownership of their own education. Because ultimately, that's what you want, is you want students who are saying, wow, that's cool, I didn't know that, and they touch on the picture of the whale and it suddenly comes to life and swims, it's Harry Potter's moving pictures book. And then they're engaged. When I talk to teachers who have used the laptop project, the most common term, the most common word they use is engaged. And if you have students who are engaged, you can teach them anything. If you have students who are looking out the window, you could be Thomas Jefferson and Socrates and not teach them anything. And so the engagement is the important part. Now there's a downside to it. Kids can wander off and they can get on Facebook. And when I was a kid, we didn't go on Facebook. We had the comic book and the geography text in the back, like this. I'm reading. So there are those kinds of issues. But I think, Al, the secret is freeing up the teacher to be the coach instead of doing the 2 + 2 is 4 and that kind of thing. And the other thing is this iPad experiment over in Auburn. I got to tell you, when the superintendent of schools called me and said, you got to come over, we're going to give iPads to every kindergartner, even I said, huh? 5-year-olds? But then I went over and saw it, and you realize 5-year-olds interact with the world through their fingers. The iPad was a natural for these kids because they can't really very well hold a pencil or a pen, and they were doing the letters with their fingers and tracing them out, and my understanding is it's been pretty successful, very successful. And again, it's using the tools that we have. That's the way I see it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't have a good segue for this, so let's go to net neutrality. What do you think? I'm for it. I don't think people who own the pipes should be able to say who gets to drive faster on the pipes. Does that make any sense? In other words, if net neutrality is allowing equal access on a non-discriminatory basis. That's how I understand it. And if you owned a highway and you also happen to be Ford Motor, and you said, okay, anybody can use my highway, but Fords can go 80 and everybody else has to go 20. That wouldn't do much for innovation. It wouldn't do much for broad use of the highway. And I think that's the way I feel about net neutrality. I mean, I think it's an important principle. It has to be kept open. So.
This question came to the website prior to the event, and it's from Daniel Kent, who's the Executive Director of Net Literacy, and they're in Indiana. And his question was, while I and my organization, Net Literacy, are based in Indiana, we're excited this event is taking place and wish we can replicate this event for our own congressman someday. Because we're in Indiana, we're going to be joining the town hall virtually. Net neutrality has been a contentious issue. What is Governor Angus's position on it, which you've started to talk about, and how will that impact the citizens of Maine?
Well, I think I'll answer the second part because I think I answered the first part. The impact on the citizens of Maine is it'll make equal access. And plus it's not only us as consumers, but it's somebody in Maine creates a website and wants to start a business. I don't think they ought to be discriminated against because they don't have some special deal cut with Verizon or Comcast. Do you see what I mean? It becomes, and that's what this issue is really all about, is everybody has access to the whole wide world. I mean, that's one of the amazing thing about the internet is the ability to start a business and make a success of it without a huge capital investment, and you can start it right here in Maine. The guys over at the Ski Depot in Jay, Maine, who sell skis all over the world on the internet, they were smart enough 10 years ago to buy the domain name raceskis.com. And they're selling skis all over the place out of Jay, Maine. I don't know about you, but well, I mean, I'm sure you share my view that you think of the great ski centers of the world: Kitzbühel, Aspen, Sugarloaf, Jay, right? Right? But here are these guys that created this business, out of their imagination, and I don't think the people that own the pipe should be able to discriminate or prejudice them because they haven't made some special deal. I think my principle is a common carrier, that everybody gets the same access.
Okay, so that really leads us into the next conversation around internet regulation. Sort of feeds into that. What are your thoughts about regulating the internet?
I can state my position on government regulation of the internet as follows. You get it? I don't think government should be regulating the internet. I mean, I think it's now you get into some really complicated issues like copyright, intellectual property, and there are tensions there. But and we were talking earlier about somebody like Texas Instruments that has a great value in intellectual property, or people that create works of art. But I think we have to tread very carefully, because in the name of protecting intellectual property, we end up just casting a wet blanket over the whole deal. If you tell, Facebook probably couldn't function under that.
That's the next question.
Yeah, I mean, no, I can't mention Facebook. But I mean, a website that if the website is liable for a copyright violation, a small website would have to hire a compliance officer. And I just think we need to be really, really careful about that. So my view is government should help to facilitate the building out of the infrastructure, but then get out of the way.
Any from online? Oh.
Hello, Governor. What is it specifically about PIPA, CISPA, SOPA, and ACTA, those types of internet regulation legislations, that you are opposed to, and how would you as a senator try to stop further bills of that variety coming down the pipeline?
Is this a quiz? Do I have to say what they all stand for?
No, you do not. Stop
Online Piracy Act is SOPA. PIPA is the Protection of Intellectual Property Act. Those are, again, that's what I was talking about. It's a legitimate issue. I mean, somebody spends $100 million to create a movie, and then it's pirated and goes everywhere, and that I consider that. I mean, I may be the last person standing who still believes that copyright holders have some rights, but I think that's a legitimate issue. I don't have the solution, but those bills that you mentioned went too far. They went too far toward the side. They basically shifted the responsibility to the website. And said, if you're responsible if copyrighted material is shown. And the problem with that, I mean, this gets so complicated. What if the website is in Malaysia? How do we regulate that? Or somebody has 50 domain names and you shut down one and the other. It's like when I first started this campaign, some guy kept doing fake Twitters. Did you remember that? And I shut down one, and then I gave up because I said, this is like cyber whack-a-mole. And it comes up over here. So that points out how hard this is. I think my instinct would be to do what I did when I was governor quite often, is lock them in a room and tell them to work something out. The Googles and the Facebooks and the Yahoos of the world and Hollywood and the recording industry, and see if there isn't a way that they can find where neither one gets everything they want, but that we don't really compromise. We can't stifle this enormous engine of human creativity in the name of protecting a specialized human creativity. I think there's a solution there that can respect both, and it may just be that the model for music is going to have to change. The model of selling a packet of data, maybe it's a different. They're going to have to figure out a different way to make money. The internet is an utterly different thing that has ever existed before, and things change. The buggy whip manufacturers are all out of business. So.
Thank you, Governor.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about social media. That rounds out. I know you have a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I have to admit, I was not a big Facebook user until about a year ago. I created a Facebook page to go with my book. By the way, this whole campaign is really an elaborate scheme to sell books. So. No, I don't think so. I think there are cheaper and easier ways to sell books. But we've created a Facebook page for the campaign, and I got to tell you, it's an amazing political phenomenon. We're closing in on 20,000 likes or fans on our Facebook page, and for me, what I've seen, and of course when I ran before, it didn't exist. It's interesting politically for a couple of reasons. One is, you can interact with people. It's like going door to door, but you don't have to walk between the houses. You know? You can interact. I spend an hour or so a night. Mary would, if she were here, would say it was 2 hours a night. Just chatting with people. You know, people write in, ask a question, and answer them. And there's a connection made. It's not as good as in person, but it's still a real connection. That's number one. Number two, it allows you as a candidate to present yourself in a more human way than just as a guy behind a podium in a suit. In other words, the pictures with your kids and little movies of what's going on. And one of the favorite postings we had is I was up in Aroostook County and giving a little report on what was going on, and I'm standing by the road, and young man Tyler Dunham is filming, and I'm saying, and we've seen lots of potato fields and lots of great people, and just then a huge truck went by, and you could hear it, boom. And my hair blows, and lots of trucks, and people loved it because it was just sort of real and, not terribly staged, not staged at all. So I'm finding it an amazing way to keep in touch with people, and I think as a senator, it would be, it would be a great way to present what's going on, and you can do it's so easy now to do a film. Dora took a picture of Matt and I walking in. Is it on Facebook?
Oh, it's been on for almost an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had my finger in my ear, but other than that.
You were standing next to me. That was the problem.
But it's an amazing phenomenon, and I think it's going to change. It's going to change politics because it's so. It reaches so many people, and the final reason is that it's a personal endorsement. If you think about it, let's say you're going to buy a car and you watch all the TV ads, you see an ad for Toyota and an ad for Honda, an ad for Chevy, and an ad for Ford, and that's information that you think about. But then if you sit down at lunchtime and a guy sitting next to you says, "I just bought a Chevy Silverado and it's the best truck I ever bought," that's going to have more weight than those ads on TV. And Facebook gives you an ability to have a kind of personal endorsement from people. And I think that's one of the ways it's most important. I may be testing how important it is because starting, in a few, I don't know when, a few days, the people of Maine are going to get a thorough dosing of negative ads about me. If you think Godzilla is ugly, wait till you see the way they make me look over the next couple of months. And Facebook is a way to be able to respond to that. If somebody spends $1 million or $3 million or whatever it is on television. So it's a way of communicating directly with people without necessarily having a filter.
Well, it occurs to me that if we're going to fix the government, we better run it on time, and that starts with running this on time, and we're out of it.
We've done it.
We've done it, sir.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so much
Matt.
for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.